I'm calling to order the October 16th Program Performance and Evaluation Committee for our Homelessness Prevention and Intervention Board. We'll start with our introduction. So I'm Liz Sheehan. I am the chair of this committee. I serve on the HPI board and then I'm a council member. I'll pass it this way to Billy.
Billy Love, board member.
Stephanie Spires, Arbor Youth Services.
Selena Liston, Arbor Youth Services.
Catherine Mitchell, Lexington Habitat.
Sherry Pennington, Mountain Cop.
Leonard Slaughter, Passport by Malia.
Shannon Derrick, Passport by Melina.
Marty Jones, Community Action Council.
David Shad, Hope Center.
Lela Still, UK Healthcare.
Christina Ellison, New Beginnings Bluegrass.
Marissa Webb, Continuum of Care Coordinator. And the sign-in sheet is being passed around, but I will place it at the end of the table. So if you do not sign in, please do so before you leave. Thank you.
Adam Kuhn, data analyst. And Jeff Herron, manager of LFECG's Office of Homelessness Prevention and Intervention.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. We have approval of our meeting minutes is first. This is the August 21st meeting minutes. Those are in your packet. This is a full membership vote, so you don't have to just be an HPI board member. Does anyone have any edits that they would like to suggest? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. From Billy, and a second.
And this could be from
Membership.
anybody.
Second.
Thank you.
Was that Christina?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Thank you all. We have several program reviews from 3 different groups. And we'll get started in the order that's on our agenda. I will just say when you're presenting or if you have questions or comments, please speak up for the microphone so that the person that does our minutes can hear clearly. The first presentation organization we have is Arbor Youth Services. They actually have 2 programs to present for the emergency shelter for 0 seems weird. For 17 or under.
I say birth. That's
Yeah.
what I'm doing, birth to
It seems
17.
weird to say 0. Because I guess you're like an hour a day a minute old. And that is through the Extended Social Resources Grant. That will be followed by the 18 to 24-year-old emergency shelter program that's also an Extended Social Resources Grant. So we do 10 minutes for presentation time. You can use up to 10 minutes. You don't have to use the whole time. And then we'll have time for questions. So I'll turn it over to you, Stephanie.
Yeah, so I'm Stephanie Spires, and I'm the Executive Director of Arbor Youth Services, and I have brought Selena, who is the shelter coordinator for the under 18 shelter. Normally we would defer this to Chris, but as you all probably know, Chris is out on medical leave, and therefore we feel like we have no idea what we're doing because Chris always does this. So if we go off or you're like, we don't need to know that or we need to know this, ask us anyway. So the shelter for under 17 is for birth to 17. We have an emergency shelter that is licensed for 10 beds with 2 additional overflow beds. The shelter is open 24/7 and is always staffed with at least 2 personnel. Legally, we only have to have 1 to be, so if there truly is like a real emergency situation, to be licensed, we only have to have 1, but it is our own private practice to have 2. We provide a safe place for youth from birth to 17 years of age who face homelessness, abuse, abandonment, or a risk of victimization. The shelter creates home-like atmosphere, which is the feedback we hear from a lot of our kids. They really love that it's in a house and not a shelter. They feel like it's in a house. You know, we have a playroom where we have lots of toddler toys and books, and then we have, you know, the video games and the TV. We have a kitchen where, you know, we eat family style, but also the youth have access to snacks and stuff throughout the day. So, you know, they can, it's just like your house. I mean, I'm a mom of 5, and some days my house looks like the shelter and the shelter looks like my house, and they're the same. Our big focus is positive youth development. That's our approach we use with all of our youth throughout the shelter in all of our programs. And positive youth development, the best way I explain it to people is we are not a treatment facility. We are an emergency shelter. We are temporary. We are here for the emergency situation. And we know the youth and children that we serve have experienced trauma. So everything we do comes from a trauma-informed perspective. And that is everything we do and talk about is trauma-informed, trauma-informed, trauma-informed. But what we try to do with the children and the youth while they are in our programs is help them have positive experiences and build positive core memories that begin to strengthen their self-esteem and their self-awareness that empowers them to begin to advocate for themselves and to begin to speak up and to begin to replace some of those negative core memories, hopefully with positive experiences, and affirms that, they have opportunities and that they are safe. And so, we do that through things, just again, like the same things you do at your house, right? Like we take them to the library, we take them to Broadway shows, to Main Event, to the fair, we try to get them out of the house. We take them to the park. They go to the schools that they're designated to go to. Our team sometimes we sitting in the stands cheering on a football game or cheering on a band concert or because it's just like that family atmosphere. That is what we are trying to do in that shelter. So our approach is positive youth development, focused on empowerment rather than punitive measures. We're not here, we know all the research really shows we aren't going to be able to really, be harsh isn't the right word, but like we're not going to change a lot in a few days, right? Like we're not here to punish you. We are not here to think negatively. A lot of the kids that come into this place have always heard negative things about themselves, and so our job is to listen to you, to affirm you, and to build you up while you're here. And then what happens after here, hopefully you have a way to advocate for yourself. So in the information that you all should have received, our target for people served was 100. Our number was actually a little lower at 70. Just some demographic breakdown of those racially. 26 were white, 32 were black, 3 were Hispanic, and 9 were multiracial. Sex, we had 36 male, 33 female, and 1 transgender youth. And then we had 24 youth under the age of 5. And I think this is really important because I was out the other day and this sweet little old lady came up to me and she said, "This is Stephanie. She runs Arbor Youth Services. My book club donates to them. They house homeless teenagers and runaways." And I was like, "And babies." And she was like, "What do you mean, and babies?" I was like, "And babies." and people don't understand, if you look at the population, our 2 biggest ones are under 5 or 24, and then 13 to 17 we had 34 youth. Our smallest are those elementary age. But we see a really high need for support services and for housing for our children who are under 5. And a lot of people don't realize that. And it is as low as birth, because we do get referrals from UK when a mom has given birth maybe and is unhoused or in a not safe situation. And so we have taken newborns and babies sometimes to help those families get some stability. So that is something I think is surprising to a lot of people. The average stay is around 12 days. We really don't want youth in our shelter, so it's kind of good the numbers are low, and that seems weird, but we know the statistics are almost, once a child enters a shelter, there is almost 100% chance they will have to enter a shelter another time in their life. And so we want to delay that if possible. I mean, we really don't want children in shelters as a community. So if we can provide support services or other things to keep kids out of our services, that's our goal. In the shelter for unaccompanied minors, clients meet with the youth advocate during initial intake to set and create individual and family goals. The client advocate will then assess, implement, and evaluate the goals daily to fit the client's and the family needs. The advocate and the coordinator meet weekly to discuss current open cases and recently closed cases. The shelter coordinator meets with the director monthly to discuss current and future improvements needed and make program progress. During discharge, the client and stakeholder both partake in satisfaction summaries. The surveys are then collected and evaluated, and improvements are made based on the feedback given. Similarly, improvements are made based on feedback given during aftercare. Aftercare is offered to youth at discharge and periodically after. We do have a lot of trouble with aftercare because, again, we're talking about babies and tracking down their families necessarily to get them that aftercare. I do want to clarify who we serve in the under 18 shelter. So we serve children who are homeless or unhoused. We do provide some respite to provide some support services before a situation may become dangerous. We have a contract with the state to provide care for kids in foster care who maybe are removed in the middle of the night, who would otherwise be sleeping on the floor of social services office. And then we also have a contract with DJJ to serve as a juvenile detention alternative initiative. And the youth that we take are the youth that maybe have assault for, like they've gotten in a fight with their parents and it's not necessarily safe for them to go home, so therefore they don't have a place to stay. Again, I'll tell you the same thing I tell the judges. Obviously, we're going out and we're out in the community, so don't think this is detention and don't send me a child that has an ankle monitor and can't go anywhere, because you're going to hear that thing beeping all over town, and I'm going to walk back in here and be like, no, we told you we're about experiences. And that's even the kids that are in the detention program. They're the kids that really need support and need that piece as well, to try to get them to advocate and have a safer situation. So that is our under 18. Do you want me to just roll into the other? Or do
Let's pause here and have questions for this, and then we can move to the other. So I'll open it up to the committee for questions or comments.
One thing I was just going to ask about, it's been a fairly kind of recent thing that you guys have really moved more into trying to focus on the positive development rather than more punitive approaches, I think, based on what Chris has shared in some previous meetings. And can you just maybe talk a little bit about what that transition was like and kind of the difference that you see? Because I feel like even though much of this we've framed as positive youth development, I think that's an approach that I would really like to see a lot of other providers also lean more into, especially in things like our shelter environments. I think we oftentimes are so focused on rules and what you can't do that I think it would be beneficial for people to hear from you about how that's impacted your experience with those that you serve.
Do you want to take it or me to take it? Okay. So for those who most I'm the new old director, right? So I was there a decade ago, and we were doing everything trauma informed and positive youth. And at that time, positive youth development spun off everybody's mouth all the time. And then when I came back a year ago, I realized no one knew what positive youth development was, even though it was loosely hidden in our grants. Oh yeah, we practice positive youth development, but if I quizzed people, they didn't know what it was, and they didn't know how to explain it. And then I also realized that our staff needed increased trauma-informed care, that we needed to have that approach. Yes, our kids are disrespectful. Yes, they're going to break rules, but they're coming from a place of trauma. They're in an emergency shelter. Nobody wants to be here. It's not going to be great. But again, everything that I know, and for those of you who know my history, I have been a foster parent. I've had over 40 kids in my house. I specialize with kids with behaviors. You can't get anywhere with a kid until you have a relationship, until you begin to have attachment. And you're not going to get attachment in less than 12 days. If you do, then we've got some other issues going on. And so what we need to do is set our kids up so that they can have positive experiences, begin to build for themselves, and then hopefully begin to transition to have those healthy attachments and such. And I give this example with everyone, but I think this is the easiest. When my daughter came into my house, she was 18 months. She had just always never had her needs met. So she didn't know the difference between a good snack, a bad snack. She just knew she didn't get snacks. So her therapist told us every time she asks for candy, sucker, whatever, give it to her, right? And that seems like counterintuitive. I am giving an 18-month-old suckers like it's whatever. And parents judge me and people judge me. But her therapist said she doesn't know the difference between a need and a want. But she knows she doesn't trust you. But she's going to have to trust you. And then once you have that trust and that attachment, you can teach her the difference between a need and a want. And so we're at that phase where we are trying to build those relationships and build that confidence. And once we have a child that has those tools, then others can come along and help them determine those needs and those wants. Also, in our approach, being trauma informed, it's really on the staff to understand that, two escalated people get nowhere. You all know that, fighting your teens and tweens. Like, you can scream at each other all day. It doesn't do anybody any good. And sometimes you have to walk away. And you know what, I say the same thing that I say to my kids. I'll say, you've hurt my feelings or I'm disrespected right now, but I need to walk away and we will talk about this in a few minutes. Because when their youth is escalated and the staff member is escalated, you're not going to get anywhere. But once everyone's de-escalated, then you can sit down and really have a conversation and understand everyone's perspectives and what got us into that situation. And so for the staff to really kind of realize, like, this youth isn't really disrespecting me. They're angry at their life right now. Again, they're in a shelter. And so, yeah, they're mad. Yeah, they're frustrated. It's nothing I've done. But also kind of recognizing, like, one of the things we had before was AWOLs. This was a big thing. I guess it's somewhere along the line. If you went outside, it was an automatic AWOL. We called the police. We made a big deal. Well, again, I'll walk it back to one of my kids. My son, when he gets mad at his sisters, walks outside the door, walks 6 doors down, sits down, and it's just like, and then he walks back in. And so we've now recognized that maybe these youth just need to go outside for a minute and they need to calm down. Let's look at it situation to situation and not just have this, they've walked outside the door, we're going to lock the doors and we're going to call AWOL. And I think it's, Selena's more, in the practice and in the weeds. So I don't know, you said you'd feedback.
I think instead of having a structure of like all the rules, like when I first started, we couldn't, like, no kid could eat anywhere except the dining room. Well, growing up for me, it was all like pizza parties in the living room. So now on Friday nights, every youth gets popcorn and we go in the living room. So it's like we see less behavioral issues when we do give them a little space, like, and not so much structure and rules.
And that's really kind of just, thank you for that. I was really just wanting to make sure that that's been something that Chris has consistently give us, like, clear examples of how there's been a positive impact from that. And I think that's something that even outside of youth, we're all dealing with people that are experiencing trauma, that don't want to be in shelter, on the streets. And I think we could all take something from that conversation. So I just wanted to make sure that we expanded a little bit on that.
Thank you.
And how long did that culture shift take once you?
It's still going on.
In the process.
It's still the process. Selena has matched up with I don't remember who you've matched up with, but we're doing a very extensive trauma-informed training with all of our staff. We've bumped up the training budget. I'm constantly sending out like, hey, do you want to do this? Hey, do you want to do that? And our CFO is like, we don't have a training budget. I'm like, well, we're going to be trained, so find some money elsewhere. He's like, okay. Those of you who know Josh, we kind of call him like our dad, because he's the guy who puts the thing on the thermostat and is like, you can't touch it.
72.
So, but yeah, so it's still an ongoing. I mean, I came back in October, and it's definitely been a shift. It's also been a shift to, I think this number when we come back next year will be higher. We're taking more kids and accepting more kids, and have really shifted our criteria too, looking at the whole picture and really as part of this and recognizing, that's one of the conversations I had with the staff is, if you turn a youth away, they're sleeping on the floor of social services or in a car. We're not the Ritz-Carlton here. So really think about that when you're having this conversation, instead of like, no, this isn't a spot for us. Where is this youth going if they're not going here? And I think that's definitely, I've seen the staff. We had one youth come in a few weeks ago who spoken language nobody in this community speaks. And my staff was like on social media trying to find someone who could speak it, trying to figure out how they could accommodate and support this youth rather than just say no, we can't. It's more of a how are we going to figure out how to provide, and that's really under Selena's leadership for sure.
What is your average daily census at both of the shelters?
In both of them, the young adult stays pretty full. It's at 18 right now. We're getting ready to add 4 beds. It'll be at 22 as soon as I add the 4 beds.
So you guys are pretty much full.
That one
there.
stays pretty full. This one, it could be like we were laughing when we had the accreditation people with us. We had 0. Like they were in for like 3 days, and they were like, "Wow, it's good that you're all here, but you have no kids." They left 2 hours later. We were at 10. So
I was gonna say, I know I talked to you later and during that time frame. That was not the case.
Yeah, and so I
It
was like,
changes daily.
yeah, every day it could be 1, 10. It fluctuates like that, and it could be like we're having a calm moment and a family of 5 comes in right now, and there's just no consistency. So
Are
we
you
always,
ever full at that one with that one? Or
yeah, I mean
you do
we've
get full?
been closer to 8, 9, 10 here lately than we have the 0, 1, 2.
And that was only 10 beds, right?
That
Or
only has
12?
10 beds. It's 2 overflow beds. We actually probably have like 14 to 16 combinations, because that's the thing, and that is that we look at if we have little ones and big ones, we don't put them together. If we have a trans youth or it's another LGBTQIA, how do we work them? And so we kind of have to shift around in that situation. If there was a true natural disaster and we went above, I mean, we would take the slap on the wrist from the state, but we have the capacity to have more in there if we needed to, if there was a true disaster of some
Do you
sort.
all have like programming there, or like groups or anything, or more kind of recreational?
We have sort of groups, but it's really, you can talk a little more. It's
Yeah, they do participate in groups. We have AM and PM groups every day.
How are the ages? Like, yeah, because you have such a wide range. So how do you divide that when you have different ranges?
Just different times. Like some staff, we just had an infant, so her group was like tummy time or hand-eye coordination or something like that. And then they will shift to the older group and they'll work on like anger management skills and stuff.
So it's not a set curriculum. It's like these are
Right.
things we could do. That's why I kind of said no, but yes, like it's just dependent on who's here and what we pull. And the thing is, because it's always changing, you might have anger management today, and you could have anger management 3 days from now with a whole different crew.
Yeah, the kids' behavioral health unit at Kentucky Children's Hospital in the last few months has went down to 5. A wider, it used to be 12 to 17, now it's 5 to 17. So like how to kind of treat those very different developmental stages. So I was just curious how you guys kind of did that. That sounds good though.
Other questions or comments? I have one. I was at an event recently and someone spoke to me about language access and about different organizations having to submit like a language plan.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you mentioned a little bit about having an example recently where there was like, we don't know what language this child speaks and how do we figure this out? So what are your standard procedures, and how often do you have someone that comes in that isn't a primary English speaker?
So that language was not even on Google Translate. Like when I say that language was the outlier language of language. We do have staff on our, we have staff that are bilingual or multilingual, and so we'll pull them in where needed.
Okay.
And they're working currently on, and that's kind of a shift I've made to hiring some more. So they're working on like translating documents and doing some of that stuff. And even just an example right now that you all maybe appreciate, we're having a lot of trouble, which I'll get to this in a minute, housing our 18 to 24-year-olds because we're finding apartments and they're not passing inspections. And so what we're looking at is a lot of them down in like Cardinal Valley area now. And so our development director is actually the most fluent person on our staff. And so she was making an appointment to go with the housing advocates so that she could translate to try to talk, because a lot of those housing managers are only speak Spanish. And so so that's really the main the majority of it is Spanish. Occasionally we get a African dialect of some sort, and then we just kind of have to case manage on it. But we really get very few. I think there were 3 Hispanic youth in this. How many? I mean, it's a lot less than I think we would even think it is. But we are doing more, and that may be on us that we've not historically translated even our brochure. But now we're in the process of translating brochures. Yesterday, if you looked on our Facebook, there was a Facebook post that was all in Spanish. And so we're trying to do more outreach to the Hispanic community to let them know that we're here.
Yeah, great. Any other things? Okay, let's transition to the other part.
Yeah, so the other shelter, which if you really have a lot of questions, Chris will be back soon. But the other shelter, so the target was 101, and it was 122 actually served. The ages for this shelter, it says 18 to 24. Technically, it's 16 to 24, but we don't really get many 16 and 17-year-olds. But if you were to align with like what the federal, oh wait, no, this is the shelter. Sorry, the drop-in is 16 to 24. Because a lot of the federal stuff for that is 16. But the shelter is 18 to 24. We currently have 18 beds that are open 7 nights a week. We sort of have a priority system, and we sort of have a lottery system, right? Like our youth that are working towards housing, they have some, we kind of save them beds. If we have a youth that is still in Fayette County schools, like a junior or senior, we work with the school district and we also have to work with them just kind of all the way around because they'll bring them on a bus at 4 p.m. Well, we're not technically open until 7, right? So we've got some support there that we can cover them during that time, and then so that they can kind of do their homework and de-escalate or debrief or whatever they need to do. You know, those kind of kids, and then what's left is kind of lotteried. And then if we, by chance, need to turn youth away, we work really hard and even provide transportation when possible to other facilities to house and accommodate our youth. So that one, the target was 101. We served 122, actually. The breakdown is, I'm trying to read Chris's notes. I'm not really following Chris's own notes here. But the majority of the youth were white, with black being a very close second, and Hispanic being about 11, Asian 1, American Indian 2, and then multi-races, about 10 youth. We served 61. Oh, this is, I see, it's the target and the actual. I was like, what are her numbers? We served 67 males, 47 females, 3 non-binary, and 5 transgendered youth in the shelter. The number of chronically homeless youth, this is our biggest challenge, is our permanent supportive youth. We are finding a lot of our youth are always going to need support and assistance. And so our target was 11, and the reality was 19. The average length of stay is about 28 days. The shortest is 1. The longest stay has been 181 days. Our exits to permanent housing was 36. The number of households accessing case management services was 90%. The percentage of participants returning to homelessness within 12 months, it was 1.64%. The percent of households served or removed for violations was 7%. At Arbor, our outreach worker meets with clients to discuss goals and progress made bi-weekly. We have file reviews bi-weekly with case managers, meetings with the director to discuss program process and the need for improvements occur monthly. Clients are allowed to fill out a survey daily to improve programs, and we run monthly reports in HMIS. As we continue to grow to learn with the clients, it's crucial to approach communication consequences in ways that foster trust and development. Engaging clients in discussions about what works best for them can help tailor strategies to feel supportive rather than punitive. The approach not only empowers the youth, but also creates a safe space where they feel heard and respected. By consistently refining our practices, we are working towards a long-term goal of equipping them with the tools they need to make informed decisions, creating a foundation for lasting positive changes in their lives. Regarding improvements, we've changed operating hours from 7:30 p.m. to 8 a.m., and we are working on a way to expand to 22 beds, which Tempur-Pedic just gave us those this week, so that should be any day now. We'll be letting you all know for sure. Just to kind of give you an overview of this shelter of the night, so we do ask we do cook a meal in the evening. So during the day, just so you know, that we're open during the day. They can come in and cook their own food and kind of, do their laundry and whatever. But at night, we try to have one family meal. Just because it's like the twitching hour on steroids. Like imagine 22 children trying to eat dinner. And then we also have been trying to bring in nightly groups a little bit as well. And so this allows that. All the youth have chores that they have to do as part of this, whether it be cleaning the bathroom or washing the dishes or picking up the trash in the yard or something like that. So all the youth have chores, and then they shower and then we it's lights out. And then they wake up the next morning, and then they are, they get some breakfast, and whether they stay and participate in our day programs or go out is on them. We have really been partnering with some other community partners. One of my favorite groups at the moment is the second year med students at UK have adopted our kids and are doing programs with them. They came and grilled out a few weeks ago with them. About 2 weeks ago, they came over and they bought a bunch of pizza and we did trivia night. And what I think is great about this group specifically is these kids are the same age as these kids, right? They're the same age, they're just in two different places. And I think it makes our kids feel normal, for lack of better words. They're doing fun things with peers their age that are just in a different place. And it seems to be a really positive relationship for both groups, and to watch them interacting and building their friendships. And that's one thing I'm trying to do too, is I think for this age group, we know that they don't necessarily like going over to the Hope Center or other places because to some degree I think it feels depressing, right? Like, oh, am I going to be here when I'm 60 years old? Is this my future? And so one of the things we're trying to do too, especially is I've kind of been connected with a group that is about 10 years out now, is getting youth back over and saying, positive experiences. Like, this is a youth that lived in the shelter and is now a social worker. This is a youth, like one of the youth at that was one of our Tay kids back in the day is, we sent him off to Job Corps, and I met him this summer out at Spindletop. He's the chef out there. He's been a chef at UK for 6 years now. He was one of our, he's a success story. And I think it's important to get those youth both back in the shelter and in the program so that our kids can see successful kids, but then also to get those individuals involved. We've got one serving on our board, serving in other volunteer capacities that really implement our structure and what we're doing and make sure that we are focused on the youth and the clients that we are serving. But yes, that shelter, probably if you gave me 40 beds, I could have 40 beds full. And so that is one. I think they do like being in the house, but that house is barely holding on. So at some point we've got to really figure out something, and then we've got to kind of probably look at what to do with our permanent supportive housing clients, because I feel like one of our biggest challenges is it's hard to even do outreach because we are getting so many youth without much outreach, right? So if I outreach and we get youth in here, then what are we doing? So that's kind of one of our biggest pieces. To kind of correlate with this though, just so you all know, we did just find the money to add a third housing advocate, because one of the things we did have is we had still some housing funds out there, and we had youth on a waiting list, but we didn't have, that doesn't necessarily give you, it says you have to have a person, but doesn't really supply the funding for that. So we have found the money, so we have a third housing, so we're able to get even more youth into housing, assuming that we could get housing through code enforcement. But if we can pass inspections, we have youth and funds. So that's kind of what we're working on. So questions?
Yeah, comments, questions?
I have two. One, I think you already answered. You don't have a target date right now for the additional 4 beds.
So probably by the end of this week.
Okay.
We just have to build them.
Can you just make sure that
we'll make
somebody
sure you know,
notifies us, because we want to update your inventory for HMIS and our housing inventory count.
Yeah, we'll make sure you're updated. The mattresses just came in like 2 days ago.
I saw. I was excited.
Well, and that was funny. I mean, this just tells you the power of social media. I put on my personal page. I don't even think we put an Arbor. I was like, who knows someone at Tempur-Pedic? I used to know everybody, but I don't feel like I know anybody. Well, I apparently knew a lot of people. And then everybody was on fall break, like texting from the beaches and stuff. And they were like, oh, I've got a contact. And in the end, we ended up with 4, which is what we needed for this, but we ended up with a slew of others. Because that was the thing Tempur was like, well, actually, we have to donate more. It's weird. They come in like a thing. And we're like, okay. But those are going to be for our youth that move into housing now. So we have mattresses now already for those youth as well. So that was really exciting. And that's just the power of social media and peer pressure. Everybody's tagging everybody. And so.
I was also going to ask around the number of chronically homeless youth. Do they meet the full HUD definition of chronically homeless, and that they have both the length of homeless history and a disability? Or are we talking more so just about the length of time that they've experienced homelessness?
The disability, more so, and then we know they're going to about, like, some may be at length, but some we just know we are just waiting on the time.
Because the examples that I'm familiar with and working with Chris have largely been when there is a disability present, but I didn't know if that kind of held
Yeah,
true.
the disability is pretty significant for a lot of our youth that we were served. And that, we don't really talk about that program here, but just so you all know, the day program has a lot of, we've got a lot of groups going, a lot of community partnerships. We have a therapy group coming in. We have a psychiatrist coming in helping with med management. So a lot of great things are happening in our day program. And to be honest, I've kind of probably been, this might be where I'm punitive. I'm kind of like, if you're sitting here, like there's some other day centers nearby where you can just go sit, because I need this space for those youth that are actively looking for housing, applying for jobs, wanting to participate, doing your laundry, doing something, but we can't just be sleeping and taking up space here. So that may be the area where we're a little punitive, is that the mom in me has put some structure
I think we
there.
actually heard from Chris on the outreach center within the last 6 months or so. So we got to hear some of those services.
It was our last.
I was gonna say,
August
I might have
meeting.
been with the last one.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. The next presentation that we have is by Christina for the New Beginnings Housing First program. That's a continuum of care program.
Yeah, thank you. So this is our permanent supportive housing program. We serve adults with serious mental illness, but specifically those diagnosed with a psychotic disorder. That's kind of our agency's mission of the population that we really want to focus on, because they are a little more challenging, require a little more time, and we do as much training and stuff as we can to really kind of offer all the supports we can for those folks. Our model of PSH is we master lease units and then sublease those to our clients, which allows us to bypass some of like the credit eviction background checks that we have. We pay like security deposits, any damages. We maintain the unit if somebody moves in and out, and you would think properties would just be falling over themselves to work with us, but for some reason they are not. Although we have 2 new properties working with us, so I'm very proud of that. Our move on strategy that we have, we use our CDBG program, which I believe last meeting I presented on, as kind of a step down. So when we have somebody who's kind of ready to leave like the structure of the housing, but still needs kind of those supports, is we connect them with some sort of mainstream subsidy, and then step them down to just have case management services with people on our CDBG program. We've actually had clients too, there's 2 that I can think of now, who over the last year who've been closed from our Housing First program for at least a couple years, and have reached back out to their former case manager, like, hey, I need help with something. It's like, great, we'll meet and warm handoff with one of my other case managers on a different program, so we can still help make sure that they stay housed, because we want them to stay happy and healthy and housed. So over this last year, we served 22 folks, over 20 households. 13 of them have been with us less than a year. So we had a bunch of newbies. 7 clients enrolled for 1 to 3 years. 2 of them have been with us over 5 years. One of the things I'm proud of my team over the last year is I think they really stepped up kind of outreach services, and this is something that I really want us to continue to grow in because a lot of our clients aren't accessing other services, a little harder to engage, and so they've teamed up a lot with paramedicine and Hope Center and Community Action Street Outreaches to try and go find people, and so we've been able to house several people off of the high utilizer list. I put a little plug on here too we had one guy at the Hope Center who'd been there for like 4.5 years, that I think they worked a couple months on him, trying to get him just on coordinated entry before he agreed to work with us. So really proud of that. I've got it here. We've also helped 2 clients over the last year obtain guardianship. Ordinarily, I would not call that a success thing since it's, involving taking people's rights. However, with these 2 particular folks, one of them is a fellow who has been with us for 5 years, has just kind of gotten a little sicker, is being victimized in the community, and so needed kind of that extra step to be able to work to get him into a higher level of care that's going to better suit his needs. And another guy who at one point had Medicaid and Social Security, disability, and all the things, lost them, and we've not been able to get him to engage with us to be able to get all these things turned back on. And so worked through guardianship so that we can get him connected to these benefits again. Like I said, 22 people served overall. Our target was 16. More men than women that we've seen in this group, predominantly white, most of our folks. I will say for our Housing First program, we do have a higher percentage of people, BIPOC folks, than like our overall agency census. I don't know if that's just from the population of chronic homelessness that we're pulling from, but I did notice that. Age ranges, there's kind of no real discrepancy between that. Our length of stay from project entry to move in has been about like 54 days. Our exits to permanent housing, I have 0% here. Please don't panic. That's not entirely true. That's why I like this meeting, so I can just talk about what the numbers don't say. Over this grant term, we had 6 people total who left the program. 4 of those people got excluded from the count. 1 was an infant who went into foster care, and 3 were people who were hospitalized and then went on to personal care homes. So they kind of get excluded from the count. The other 2 we were not able to house originally. 1 person became incarcerated before we could house him, and he did not have a release date in sight, so we went ahead and closed him. The other fellow we lost contact with, he called us a couple months after we closed him, said he was in Columbus or Cleveland managing a Starbucks. I don't think that is correct. Tried to assess if he was coming back to town. He would not tell me. So that is our exits.
Yeah. And that seems positive to
right?
me.
I mean,
Got a job.
I wish I could count him for earned income, man.
So really you have people exit to places or housing in the personal care homes, but it's only like independent living apartment situations are the only thing that counts as permanent housing.
What they consider to be permanent housing as a positive exit. For the
I consider it positive for people to get the level of care that they need.
We still think it's great, but
but it doesn't count that way.
Right, okay.
Our returns to homelessness, we had 1 person, but she was actually not our actual client. She was the partner of a client and was actually asked to leave the property prior to our actual person graduating the program. So that's our return to homelessness. Income is something we always struggle with our folks. To be honest, I think we always will struggle with it, just the nature of the people we serve and the nature of their disabilities. Most everybody, if they have income, it's going to be Social Security or SSI type payments. They're maintaining, we were talking about this earlier, maintaining their income, which I think is great, but not necessarily always a bump. But it's pretty rare that we have anybody with earned income. So we did have like 13%, and I think it's really more of not official jobs, more of secondary ways of gaining income to meet their needs. So that's our income. Our APR is not due till the end of November, but I promise I will submit it on time. We spent all of our money. I don't think any issues. We haven't had any unresolved HUD things. The one thing I'll point out of the serves all population criteria, I do say no, it's because we have that extra criteria of that psychotic disorder diagnosis. Just kind of our agency's mission, like I said, is to serve this really intensive needs population, and so we sacrifice those 5 points on our application every year to make sure that we're really helping the people that we want to help. We want to help everybody, but met all those. Data. I do data monthly, review progress. We talk about clients a lot. We have a weekly team meeting. We're talking about issues, concerns. We got a more in-depth staffing once a month. All of my case managers work at least quarterly, work on person-centered recovery goals with our clients. What is it that we can help you with and you want to work on? So we do that. We're trying to continue improving our specific policies, procedures through an equity lens. One thing we discovered, especially through doing more outreach, trying to find folks, is it was a barrier of getting in to do that evaluation process and being able to request records. And so my team's partnered more with street outreach team, paramedicine, and our clinical directors actually going and jumping in the car with them and going and talking to people in the park on the side of the road, and that's really helped a lot with us reaching some people. Participant feedback, something that we're continuously trying to improve. We did change our overall agency satisfaction survey. I've mentioned this in our CDBG presentation. I guess I did not realize, but our previous one was 3 pages long, and I'm I don't want to fill this out. So we did a lot of research. We found one that's 8 questions, a lot simpler, really kind of summarizes all the things, and we got a lot better response. We've also tried over the last year to do a lot more one-on-one conversations with people where we do subleases with our clients. I meet with them at the initial move-in to go over kind of all their paperwork, the leasing stuff. At their renewal time, I meet with them one-on-one, and then anytime they're in the office, and I can call them and reach out to them and try to talk about what is it we can do. What we found is I wasn't really getting a lot of big overall feedback, if I got anything at all. So it's okay, the smaller things are what's important to our people. That's what we'll focus on. And then we've also tried to include kind of the supporting network. So some of the property managers who know the clients, friends, neighbors, family members who are involved in their care. We've recently started to try and loop them in as well to see if they have suggestions for how we can improve our services. I guess along that line is one of the significant barriers we face with participant feedback is due to the symptom burden, sometimes their ability and willingness to kind of meet with me and talk about stuff like that. Our goals, I want to continue. I want to get all the landlords' properties I can on board with our programs. So we've really been working a lot of just going out and stopping in at places, giving cards, taking cookies, trying to recruit people. I want us to keep kind of pushing outreach and find our folks who aren't connected with other systems, and then keep on working on participant feedback. And that's New Beginnings Housing First.
Questions, comments for this program?
I should know this, but are you Lexington only?
Yep.
Okay.
For now.
I have
Big
an
goals is
I know an apartment manager, but it's in Richmond, so I thought, that might be a fit that way.
And this is more of a comment than a question, but I just wanted to share with the group how important I think that your outreach efforts and your ability to go and bring clinical services into the field is and do an evaluation that way. It just highlights to me the importance of meeting people where they are. I can think of at least 3 examples off the top of my head where we have collaborated with your team and solved a really challenging need extremely quickly. One example being, as we were headed into Christmas break last year, there had been a gentleman that I had been encountering in the parking garage every so often. We were having a really hard time of being able to arrange any kind of follow-up contact to make his situation move forward. So one day as I go in, encounter him again, I said, come on, we're going to Starbucks, I'm getting you breakfast. sit them down, gives me a little bit of time to contact paramedicine and New Beginnings. Within a couple of hours, I had a picture that he was filling out an application for housing. Another example, we had a lady, definitely SMI, getting reports from neighbors, but she's wandering around in a particular area. Just had some encounters with my code enforcement officer, had some choice words for him. We were really struggling to get somebody to engage. Paramedicine and New Beginnings went out with her, had her in housing very quickly. Another lady who a number of us would probably know had been dubbed the urban camper at one point because she could pack up her entire tent and home situation within a matter of minutes and be out of sight. Had unfortunately police contact me about having some trouble with her one morning as I came into work. Same day she was in housing. So the beauty of being able to meet people where they are is that it does produce real results, and I think it's just something that we all need to keep in mind about how we can reduce barriers and really work with people. I appreciate your work.
Yeah, I feel like you've really increased your, like, together we've increased the referrals from coming from Eastern State Hospital too, because I see that a lot, that you guys are involved in a lot of those transitions.
As like, there was one that I heard on a meeting last week who's there, and I was emailing Sharon in the middle of it. It's like, who's a social worker? Can I come see him tomorrow?
Yeah, I feel like that we've increased that, and it's good.
Any other questions or comments? Is your gender breakdown is pretty, it's almost 50-50. I was a little bit surprised by that, but I don't know the actual breakdown for like gender of what the prevalence is for psychotic disorders. I think I had an assumption that it was more heavily male, but could you talk a little bit about what you see, or like is or what the gender breakdown there is for the different disorders that you see?
Yeah, so most of our folks just overall have a diagnosis of schizophrenia. I can't really tell, like, we've seen any sort of discrepancy between the two. I think just kind of intuitively, I would think that more female identifying would be willing to work with us more, but it seems like those have been some of the people who have been more resistant to wanting to work with us. Like, for instance, one of the women Jeff was just talking about, it was like a year and a half of us trying with her, like on many occasions.
I was trying with her since I started my position.
Yeah, I was like, so, and a lot of the men are a lot more like, oh, okay, here we go. So I don't know.
Well, and that might explain some of the nuance of it too, is like when I've heard, like, you know, general clinical kind of descriptions of like schizophrenia, and the prevalence is the general population, not the population necessarily that you're surveying. So that makes sense.
I also know that obviously women are more likely to seek out treatment of any kind, so I think that also might have an impact.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Our last presentation that we have today is from the Salvation Army, and I'll turn it over to you. But do you want to introduce yourself for the room, since we did introductions at the beginning?
My name is Asid George. I'm an officer or a pastor with the Salvation Army. I've worked with the Salvation Army for the last 34 years. This is my church, so I am a pastor in this church. Because this is my church, I'm fifth generation into this church, when the church began in 1865 in England. So my grandparents were Salvation Army officers in India. My great-grandfather was a Salvation Army officer as well, before he decided to leave India and come to the United States. And so that's my primary role, as well as my training. Not really trained in social work or many of these many of the other disciplines per se call me to preach or teach, and it's easy, or it's hard work, but at least I know my bailiwick or my wheelhouse. So that's who I am. In the Salvation Army, husbands and wives are both expected to be, when you're a couple, expected to be pastors. And so my wife, along with me, is a pastor as well. She's been 32 years in the ministry. We were empty nesters, and so we decided to obey the Lord, and just doors opened up, and we went and worked in Myanmar before there was a military coup, and we got kicked out for the sake of our health. The American government and the embassy whom we visited said, we won't be able to protect you expats, so get out. So that's what we did. You can see my Tarzan-like figure. If I got punched once, I would be in glory. So my wife and I decided to leave pretty quickly. We went to Singapore, and in the meantime, many of you are aware that we had a crisis with the Salvation Army in Lexington around November of 2022, September, November of 2022. So we were recalled in December at a week's notice. At the time we came, it was March. And so we've been serving in Lexington since March and have enjoyed our time. March 2023, year and a half or thereabouts, we've been here. So that's who my wife and I are. Because of the crisis, at least 50% of our church left, and 60 to 70% of our staff left. Our environment in the workplace, management-wise, is dysfunctional, and the ship needs to be turned around. It's a fairly large ship for a Salvation Army officer, because we're trained to take care of a church, not necessarily a boys and girls club, a daycare center, and a shelter of 156 minimal people. So for us, this is a fairly large learning curve to be hands-on with this kind of ministry. Considering the fact that 60 to 70% of our staff left, here we are explaining a dysfunctional shelter to you, which is not really meeting the standards in most ways. So we're striving to achieve the standards.
Why don't we transition over to, so you'll present about the emergency shelter for women and children for the Emergency Solutions Grant. So you have about 10 minutes to present about the shelter, whatever you would like to tell us, and then we have some time for questions.
Beautiful. So we are following our mission, and for that reason, as a church, we have our shelter. It is not a business for us, and so 92% of our funding for the shelter comes from us, which means that we raise the funds for it outside of this, in public, and from our congregation members. So 92% comes from there. Our women's shelter has children, and if the woman has a husband or a boyfriend, we have them. In the past, we've had more than 156 people, and we've had people sleeping in our corridors, etc. It's obviously a hazard, but this does take place, and probably because of our heart and our mission will continue to take place. Unfortunately, because when a person comes at 2 a.m, she or a family can be asked to leave. And so we open the doors up, and there they are in our corridors. You probably know more than me of the clients or the residents we have, their personalities and the difficulties. So for me to tell the choir would be quite difficult. And so in the area of expectations, why does a person leave? Is that documented every time? Probably not. So we fail in that. We strive to do as much as we can on that. In our caseworkers, we ideally, for 156 plus people, ought to have at least 12 caseworkers. Our lowest about 2 months ago was 2 caseworkers, and at the highest we have 5 to 6 caseworkers. Therefore, I am challenged to give you productive and excellent reports of the standards I've achieved. And so that is the case. When you look at, for example, some of our figures, those are right before you. I don't need to repeat most of them to you. You can read them and ask me questions on them. Let me leave it at that and look for questions, because that would be more helpful for you to understand us.
Okay. Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
I'll open it up for questions or comments.
I have a question, but I'm trying to find how you commented on it. It was something about streamlining kind of rule and rule reduction, and I was sort of looking at the length of stay. And so in that conversation, I think one of the things that I work with the domestic violence programs with Greenhouse 17, and so we often probably share a lot of folks. And so one of the things that I think has always been kind of ebb and flow are the rules and expectations to be able to stay at Salvation Army, and if for some reason somebody had to leave, is there a time period before they can come back? Because it's such a tenuous thing between either domestic violence safety or homeless and housing insecure. So there was a comment about the rules, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the rules required for a resident to stay at Salvation Army, and is that softening a little bit, or is it more less rules but pretty stringent?
We do have probably at least a page and a half of rules. And yes, people are asked to leave for certain violations. There is much that is accepted or tolerated simply because of our compassion. However, when you are managing with few people, not just 156, but in winters, if it goes to, in say 2022, we had approximately 250 people living over there. How does one manage that and keep calm with few people? So, do I have a very gentle answer for this question? No, I don't.
But I wanted one.
I know. I'm not at the front lines. Mary, Sherry, and some of these people whom you work with are at the front lines. There are always conflicts. The fire department is twice a day at our place. The police come alongside them. There are people who are threatening suicide. There are people who are overdosing. All these issues taking place. People are fighting, conflicts. And how does one maintain peace amongst the 156 plus residents is difficult. I'm more than willing to send you the rules if you don't already have them. I'm more than willing to sit with you and work with you on the rules. That's all I can say.
That's okay. You know, and that actually might be helpful, because sometimes we are referring folks to Salvation Army because we ourselves might be full or for whatever reason. And so I always think part of our job as an advocate is preparing folks for when they go to court or another program, or what those expectations are. So it would be really good. I found this statement though. It just said consolidation/shortening of our rules and regulation list. So it just sounded like that was something you were concerted to talk about.
Evaluation and improvement towards the end of the handout.
Yeah.
And I can actually speak to this a little bit, just in terms of, I do know that there's been some efforts to truly try to condense some of the rules. My office has had some conversations with the Salvation Army staff, and they have been receptive to trying to reduce some of those down. We totally understand that when you are dealing with a congregate setting, there has to be rules, obviously. And I think at some point, maybe sometime over the years, some of the rules that got kind of tacked on maybe didn't seem as vital to keeping order and safety as they started to feel kind of restrictive. And so the staff did take a look at those. Kendall Anderson, who was serving as their development staff person, was receptive to that. The casework staff have been receptive, like in the conversations we had around emergency shelter standards. And I think they took a lens back at what of the rules are more essential and what might be something we could potentially relax or do away with. So that seems a positive progress.
That's awesome, and I think it's, I mean, even Stephanie kind of mentioned a little bit early in your presentation with Arbor Youth of, kind of looking back, and it's like, how did this rule start happening, and we want to kind of be in a more trauma-informed space. I always love David's conversation of the Men's Hope Center. So it sounds like lots of agencies are kind of looking at rules and going, how did this happen, or this really is helpful, So I saw it there, and I know shifting from Greenhouse to Salvation Army, because we do operate a little bit differently, but we're much smaller, so we're like a 42 bed. But we utilize a lot of your services, so I just like to know. So thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I had a quick question. What is so you mentioned at one point you had only 2 case managers. At the Heights, you've only had 5, which is still an average of 31 clients.
The average is quite bad, yes.
Yeah.
Ratio.
So what is your obstacle? Is it funding for case managers? Is it finding qualified case managers? What are you finding the barrier to get this support?
Funding is an issue at this point. My church is $500,000 in deficit for the 5th year in a row. In 3 years, my bank will run dry. So how do I find funding post-COVID? And plus we had the micro bubble of a November 2022 to January, February 2023. We had that financial crisis micro bubble, which has made people shy of giving. Plus post-COVID people are shy of giving. Now we're entering into an election time, which is keeping people from giving. And people's giving habits have changed post-COVID. So all of these are really hurting us. And I am struggling. First of all, the Salvation Army, I've worked in New York City. I've worked also in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. So I'm aware of the payroll atmosphere. In New York, I had to pay if I wanted to get somebody. It's harder to find money here, or it's harder to convince people to pay more. And with the budget I have. So those are some of my challenges, to find more funding and then to increase the salary base as a not-for-profit, which I'm sure half of you are in my boat. Mm-hmm. Not the best answer, but that's all I have. Sorry.
No, but that's good. I mean, because I know, like at Arbor, we also struggle with some staff turnover. It is a little bit of payroll, and we have some trouble recruiting sometimes for certain shifts and positions. Our housing advocates and case managers stay pretty full, though. We have people always inquiring. So that's why I was kind of curious if you were trying to get to 12, but it sounds like you are, but you aren't, because you don't have the funding. So it's not like you've got 12 ads up on Indeed, or Teresa sending out the thing like now hiring to all of us.
You hire 2 and you lose 1.
Yeah.
You hire 1 and you lose 1, and so it's you know how it is.
I was going to ask, and I understand you might not know, you might have to talk with your staff, but the percentage of households that were served that access case management services was listed at 13%. And I was wondering why that number was so low. Does that tie in with the staffing challenges? Is that unwillingness of persons to participate in case management? Because I know in the past that's been kind of a requirement, was to participate in meetings with your case manager and case management services. So I was just kind of wondering if you knew why it was only 13%.
Jeff, I don't know the exact answer, and I'll have to
That's fair.
ask for maybe the answer to be submitted to you. How's that?
That works.
Other questions or comments?
Not a comment, or not a question, just a comment. Like when I'm looking at the length of stays, like 30 days, 52% being there 30 days. That's like, if you look at like the Hope Center, I think this is the difference between like women and families and men. Like our length of stay is anywhere from like 2 to 10 days is like that. The bulk of the people that we get, like far more than 50%. So I think it's interesting to see how much longer women are staying than our guys are. And I think it's just a difference in.
And I think these length of stays are a little bit more consistent with kind of the general trends that we see within our homeless population, in that we see a significant portion, about a quarter, that are able to kind of quickly self-resolve, especially when they're in an environment that they might not want to be in, like shelter. And then another like 25% or so being able to self-resolve within about a 2-month period. So I would say that's probably fairly consistent. I think I think you guys have some challenge. I think you're right. There is some differences between the populations. I think that women and families probably sometimes have more opportunities, more support, and I think sometimes our men are a little bit, I'd say, better equipped to maybe handle the shelter environment, or to handle some of the aspects of the experience that they have. Which might result in a slightly longer length of stay. Other questions or comments?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
On the ongoing evaluation and improvement section, you listed out several trainings that you all have been engaging in. And this kind of relates to what Diane was mentioning and some of our discussion earlier. It looks like your caseworkers and staff have done mental health first aid training and trauma-informed care for adults and children both, and conflict management training. So do you have any insight about how that has changed your approaches, or what you all have learned in the trainings that you're kind of incorporating now?
To begin with, the trainings have taken place, most of them in the last year and a half, and thanks to a new HR director, as well as my wife and I, as well as our development director. So our team recognizes the needs to speak about conflict management between, say, employees and the people who are coming for assistance, but also between silos at times, between people. How do we more effectively work with another person so we can be positively treated by one another, as well as be efficient in our managing our portfolios and managing our the goals, the mission, and helping one another, helping the client or the residents. We're striving, for example, the results would be we're striving to have more interaction with our with the residents at the shelter. They come for women's programs. They come for our Sunday programs. There are 2 kitchens. We have 2 large kitchens. So one is their kitchen, one is the kitchen on this side, which is serve the Boys and Girls Club, the church, as well as the Early Learning Center. So they're able to come on both sides, meet with different people. So there is all of this taking place, which is a good cross-fertilization or a movement. So it's not like they're restricted to their place. The way with conflict management, as well as effective ways of working with one another, also helps them to work with the clients, with the residents. How do we do that? So all of that is being inculcated, and we are having these training sessions almost once every 4 months. We invite people from our offices in New York as well as in Ohio. So these are some of the larger offices, and they have more personnel and more experienced personnel. So we're striving to bring some of these experts into our side and using these free resources. So it's helpful. Does that answer
Yeah.
partially your
Yeah.
question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'd just like to thank you for taking the step of trying to increase the level of training. I think those are great tools to provide. And I know I've had conversations with Kendall and Michelle about that, and I appreciate that under your leadership, you're making sure that's a priority.
It's a team, yeah, it's teamwork. Michelle is excellent.
She is.
And Jeff, did you say you were going to send out, or maybe the if there is an updated list of kind of rules and regulations? Because at Eastern State, we're so appreciative that you all help us with many of our transitions. But just like Diane was saying, we like to prepare people for what to expect when they're coming. So yeah, if I could get, or if that's something we'll send out, that'd be
Sure,
helpful.
I'll be glad to do so.
Thank you so much.
I'll be happy to facilitate getting that to people.
Awesome.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing that ends our presentations. Is the next thing on our agenda or any other public comments or announcements that folks have for the group?
My only one is a plug that tomorrow's Purple Thursday, so it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So if your coworkers or your team or your book club or you and your kids or whatever, you want to wear purple and take a picture. And Jeff sent it out on email, so everybody has it to send to Stephanie Theakston. Greenhouse 17 is also doing it, so either or. We tend to share a lot of that, but if you can wear purple with Domestic Violence Awareness Month in your mind, we would love that.
I'll have my purple Jordans on tomorrow. I just wanted to go ahead and share an announcement. I know we are later than usual in publicly announcing our winter plan. And I just wanted to share a little bit of context to ease people's mind and kind of give them a sense of what's going on. So we initially wanted to replicate the model that we used last year with having a site like the Hope Village. Unfortunately, after last year, the YMCA was not going to allow us to return to their property. We then began looking for other properties, looking at what was zoned correctly. That automatically gave us very few options. We did not feel confident about being able to pursue something like conditional use permitting in the time frame that we were looking at, and thinking that it would be highly contested potentially. We engaged a commercial realtor, worked on identifying space, found one that we really liked. I was hoping for potential permanent development as well as short-term. There was some pushback on that location, and then we also, in having conversations with the Hope Center, knew that it was going to be less feasible for them to operate that operation if it was not in close proximity to their emergency shelter, where they could easily send staff over to assist. Facilitate meals, being in close proximity to their cafeteria. So we had to switch gears late in the game when we saw all the red flags about why this might not work. So at the end of August, we had to shift towards returning to a hotel-based model. Did have enough funding that we are going to be able to retain a season-long approach, so it won't be we're moving you in when it's extreme weather, we're moving you out when it's not. It will run from November 1st through April 1st. LFUCG is maintaining approximately 95 hotel rooms that we're going to be partnering with supportive service agencies to place people into and to provide services while they are with us. Definitely, we are going to have times during the season where people are going to have to expect that they are going to have roommates when we have double rooms, so that we can ensure that the most number of people possible are sheltered. We'll do things like provide expectations documents that kind of outline things like that from the onset, because we also know that with the motel, there's probably not going to be as much flexibility on things like violation of rules that we have with the Hope Center as a homeless service provider. That also has made the timeline to release this information more challenging, because without an operator who was able to kind of take care of some of that, my 3-person office, and specifically me, has had to work on generating hotels to use that would work with us and getting agreements through council, but also doing the same thing with security and meals and services. And so there's a lot of different administrative pieces that we've had to quickly piece together. And you'd be surprised, or maybe not, that in trying to find a service like maybe security, it was not uncommon for me to just not get a return response from someone that maybe didn't want to work with our population or with the model that we were using. So that definitely made it harder for us to release this information early. I'm hopeful that at the start of next week, we'll be able to publicly release information and begin taking applications. We are going to take applications with individuals so that we can ensure that we're prioritizing those with the greatest level of need, such as those that don't have access to other forms of shelter, whether that be because they have pets, whether that be because of not having a shelter that can accommodate their household composition. We also want to be considerate of things like those that would have medical vulnerabilities and other factors that would make them more susceptible for health and safety risks. So we'll be starting those application processes next week, and we will hope to have our full winter weather document out to you soon. But we just been getting a lot of individual inquiries, so I wanted to make sure that I kind of gave some information to the group, help you understand, maybe help your teams in working with individuals who might have some anxiety around winter coming. We are going to have a solution available. It is not necessarily going to be the same solution, obviously, that we had last year. We won't have as much flexibility in terms of things like in the middle of the night, someone has a need for shelter. It's not just that police can simply direct them or drop them off to the Hope Village. It's going to take a little bit more coordination. So definitely, for example, encourage if there's somebody that's in need, we're going to have to try to the extent possible, try to go ahead and initiate that contact if we can during business hours, so that we have a greater ability to follow up and get that person placed. We are going to have some systems that people will be able to reach us after hours. It's just going to be more challenging for us to be able to do 24/7 kind of placement within that model. So please know that I am receptive to trying to work through you with any issues, but I do anticipate it's going to be a little bit harder on this model and with this approach. But I think that collaboratively we can get through it and keep people safe. We have 8 different partner organizations who are providing supportive services, who are being tremendously helpful, as well as a number of other partners like our shelter providers that presented today, who helped in the development of our plan, as well as council members like Councilmember Sheehan, police, paramedicine. So we're very grateful for your partnership, and we'll do our very best to guide everybody through a safe and productive season.
Thank you for all of your work. I love the Hope Village. I'm really sad that it's not happening, and kudos to Hope Center for doing it last year, but pulling all that, I mean, I have a hard time putting a birthday party together, so I can't imagine, winter weatherization for 100-ish people in Lexington for 5 months, so.
I will be glad when all the contracts are officially done and I don't have anything else to push through council.
So it will go through your office, Jeff, the applications for that?
So we're gonna have a few different ways that we're gonna do that. I'm trying to line up some physical locations that people can start going into next week. And then we also will have like our street outreach teams as a point of contact to help with taking those applications. My office, I would like to try to, since we're not really equipped to be direct service.
I know that sounds like a lot, so.
I'm in meetings and stuff a lot. I don't want someone to be like just calling my number continuously if there's a better method. So we're gonna try to utilize some centralized locations and then also our street outreach teams.
Gotcha. What was the capacity last year?
So last year, we actually increased the capacity. Originally, it was gonna be a standard capacity of 160 with a surge capacity of 200. We ended up getting additional bunk beds that expanded our capacity. I'd say probably about 240 would have been our high capacity. At our peak, we had 221, average around 135. So with 95 rooms, we are gonna have a number of double rooms. Most of our rooms are gonna be doubles, in fact. And so it's just going to be a reality that to get anywhere near that capacity, we're going to have roommate situations. That's just going to have to be an expectation from the onset. I know it might not be everyone's preference or ideal for everyone, but in terms of an emergency model to keep people safe, it's the best that I was able to facilitate with what I had to work with.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely better. I mean, better than nothing for sure, and hopefully it'll be just as good.
I didn't want to move people in and out constantly. I could have probably
Yeah.
maximized a lot more rooms, but I felt strongly about the sustainability that that long-term approach had and how effective it was. We moved, I would say, at least 50 households into permanent housing through the last winter season by having the ability to consistently engage instead of we don't know how to contact you, where to find you.
Right. Okay. That's good.
Are there questions I can try to answer about winter now? Again, I'll have much more available to you next week.
I have one quick announcement. Council has been working to try to get out into the community more to gather feedback, and so we have an event coming up this Saturday. So I'm going to pass these door hangers around so you can have one. It's English on the front and Spanish on the back. This particular event is focused around our transportation network, and there are education opportunities, like lots of tables and things where you can come and learn about what's going on in government, but there's also feedback opportunities for people to provide feedback about the pluses and the minuses of our current transportation network in all modalities of transportation. So please share this around with your networks, and we're trying to get people there, but then also there's the QR code in the website. If you can't attend, you can still give feedback. So check that out, and again, please share. And there's postings all over social media from the council, so you can also share through those methods as well. Any other announcements?
We do have a trunk or treat at Eastern State Hospital tomorrow. If anyone is interested in bringing your kiddos or yourself, I mean, all are welcome. It's 6 to 8 at Eastern State. Yeah. It was really fun. We had one, it's only our second one. We did it last year, and it was mostly staff families, but I think we're trying to expand it a little bit more to the community this year, so.
What was the time again?
6 to 8.
Any other announcements? Okay, our next meeting is December 11th. It's here at 1:30, and the presentations for that meeting will be Arbor Youth, again for the Rapid Rehousing for Youth program, and then Mountain Comp Care has two, their permanent supportive housing and their rapid rehousing program. So if no one has anything else, I will say we are adjourned.